Indigenous Peoples Day. Indigenous Peoples Day is about celebrating. The second Monday in October is a day to honor Native American people, their histories, and cultures. People mark the day with marches, dancing, and food. Find out how a shared holiday can have multiple traditions and be celebrated in all sorts of ways. What is Indigenous Peoples Day? Some holidays are old, others are not, but new holidays can teach us a lot. Indigenous Peoples Day started in 1992. It is the second Monday in October. Indigenous means to be the very first to live in a place. Indigenous Peoples Day celebrates Native Americans in the United States. More people celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day every year. In some places, the day is called Native American Day. Lots of cities and states celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. Does yours? On Indigenous Peoples Day, people think about the past. It is a time to remember the promises the U.S. government has made to Native Americans. The government has made treaties or agreements with Native people for many years. People want to honor Native American culture. Culture is the way of life for a group of people. It is the language, art, music, and traditions. The holiday shows pride in things Native people have done. About 6 million Native American people live in the United States. Their ancestors have lived here for thousands of years. They were here long before Europeans arrived. There are hundreds of Native nations in the United States. Native people live all across the United States. They live in big cities, they live in small towns, they may live on the reservations, or they may not. Which Native nations are in your state? Changing the story. Indigenous Peoples Day is the same day as Columbus Day. Columbus Day has been a U.S. holiday since 1934, but many Native and Indigenous people do not want to celebrate Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus did not discover North America. There were already lots of people here. Columbus kidnapped Indigenous people, he enslaved and killed many of them. Because of this, people do not want to celebrate him. People who celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day want to celebrate and learn about all the things Native people have done. They want to honor people like the Taino. They were the first people Columbus met. Many people who live on islands in the Caribbean have Taino ancestors. A time to gather. People celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day in many ways. They may cook some traditional foods. They might cook wild rice or make fry bread. People may go see elders. They hear stories about the past. Others may visit other Native leaders. They talk about the important things that are happening in their communities. Some Native people go to a powwow to celebrate. If they do, they might wear regalia. This clothing is worn for special events. Native communities may gather for a feast. They might host a powwow. There could be dancers and drum groups. They may hold ceremonies and parades. In the state of Minnesota, many people gather at the Minneapolis American Indian Center. They gather for food and dancing. They see family and friends. It is one of the oldest Indian centers in the country. The United Indians of All Tribes Foundation holds rallies and marches. This group is in Seattle, Washington. They celebrate the work which led the city to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. Native people in the area celebrate with traditional songs and dances. They also have a traditional salmon dinner. They gather at the Daybreak Star Indian Cultural Center in Seattle. Indigenous Peoples Day is a way to celebrate Native art and culture. Some people celebrate by reading poems. In 2020, 3 Native poets, Sherwin Bitsu, Joan Navayuk Kane, and Tommy Pico read their poems for an event in Brooklyn, New York. People go to museums. The National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. has art on display by Native painters. There might be singers or drum groups there. Native authors might share their books, and people might give speeches. They remember their ancestors. Some people think that Native people have disappeared, but that is not true. Native people are still here. Native people have a long history of activism. Many people wanted a day to celebrate and learn. You can learn about Autumn Peltier. She is a water protector. Water protectors are people who want to keep water safe and clean. Peltier has spoken out for clean water her whole life. You could also learn about Frank Wallen. He is an activist and a hip-hop artist. He wrote a song to let people know about a project that would harm Native lands. More than a day. Indigenous Peoples Day is just one day. Native people celebrate their past all year long. They honor their cultures all year. They learn their languages. They teach their languages. They practice traditional ceremonies. Every summer, Native nations in the Pacific Northwest go on a tribal canoe journey. They travel the same water routes as Native people long ago. They build canoes to travel along the West Coast. Canoes are an important part of their culture. The tribal canoe journeys are a time for many nations to gather and celebrate. Indigenous people in the United States hold two big events in November. The Indigenous Peoples Sunrise Ceremony is also called Unthanksgiving Day. It is the fourth Thursday of November. It began in 1975. It is held in San Francisco Bay in California. The Native Americans of New England host a National Day of Mourning. It is also on the fourth Thursday in November. These events remind people about things that matter to Native peoples around the world. August 9th is the International Day of the World's Indigenous People. The day brings attention to the needs of Indigenous people all over the world. More than 370 million Indigenous people live across more than 90 countries. There are many ways to celebrate Indigenous people.